Chapter 4, and what we're going to talk about is the allocation of indirect costs that are part of the manufacturing process. And this is part 1. We'll look at plant and department allocations of indirect costs, and we'll start looking at what we call ABC costing. Now, for overview for the whole chapter, our focus is going to be looking at various ways to allocate overhead costs. And we'll discuss these 3 methods, plant, department, and ABC. Then we'll look a little at lean operations, and then we'll go through the preparation of cost of quality report. Now, in part 1 and 2, I go over examples that are just like your homework and walk you through them the way I would do them. Now, plant-wide is you just take the total overhead costs and come up with one rate, and it applies to all the departments. Department overhead rates, what we would do is have separate overhead rates for each department. So if you had a machine shop and then you had a polishing shop, they would each have their own overhead. And then the last we talk at, which is a new method, it's called ABC costing. Now this method is an expensive method to implement, but if you implemented it, it would really help you with identifying where the costs are, because that helps you better price your products. So it establishes manufacturing overheads based on activities as cost objectives. Example would be running the machine, assembly. You could have different parts of the process. So how do you do the plant-wide overhead? Well, actually calculating overhead rate is the same regardless of what method you use. You're always going to take the total estimated indirect costs associated with whatever you're doing and divide by the total estimated allocation base. Now, remember, when you come up with a predetermined overhead rate, you're doing this at the beginning of the period. So it is an estimate. And you're going to use it as a basis of allocating this cost. Now, when you're doing department-wide overheads, it's the same thing. First, and that's called manufacturing overhead costs. So you're going to estimate the total manufacturing overhead costs incurred by the department for the upcoming year. Remember, it's always the estimate. And then you're going to select an allocation base depending on what drives the costs in the department. Is it running the machine? Is it the labor? Is it the packaging? Is it purchase orders? These would be things you'd have to take a look at. Then you're going to actually calculate the overhead by taking that total estimated cost and dividing by the estimated department allocation base. And then what you're going to do is you're going to apply this. And the way you apply it is always going to be to take that rate times the actual amount of the allocation base used. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go through an example. So here's our example. Our total plant-wide overhead costs are $1,000,001, and of that amount, Department N incurred 700 is estimated to incur 740, and Department F is 360. Now the department rate right now is allocated based on direct labor hours, which are estimated for the year to be 27,500. Now, Department M estimates they're going to use 14,800 machine hours, and Department F is estimating they have 18,000 direct labor hours. So that must be their cost drivers when you come up with their rates. So we have 2 jobs. So first, what we're going to do is come up with the overhead rates. So when we look at this, job 1 has for one product, it uses 2 machine hours and 1 direct labor hour. And from Department F, it uses 4 direct labor hours. Now, what's the plant-wide overhead rate? It's going to be the estimated overhead cost divided by the estimated direct labor hours. It's 40 bucks an hour. Then we're going to calculate the overhead rate for the Department M, which is going to be based on machine hours, and Department F, which is going to be based on direct labor hours. Now let's take a look at applying it. For using the overhead rate, it's just going to be 4 direct labor hours. So each job 1 and 2 are both going to get $200. Now, what about if we use by department? Well, Department M is going to allocate $100 for job 1 and $350 for job 2. And Department F is going to charge, based on labor hours in their case, $80 and then $60 for job 200. So the total applied overhead is very different. We get $180 for job 100, and for job 200 we get $410. So what it means is that job 100 is overcosted based on using the plant-wide overhead by $20, and job 200 is undercosted by $210. That's quite a difference. So the thing to remember, the closer you get to the cost driver, the better you determine the true cost of the items you manufacture, which also helps you make the most profit if you know where all your costs are going. Why and how do companies refine their cost allocations? Well, they want something that's more precise, that reduces the cost distortion, which we just saw, focuses on activities that drive the costs. Indirect costs are allocated based on types of activities and to the extent to which the activities are used, and the same basic steps as departmental cost allocation, except based on activities or cost drivers. So we're talking about what we call is ABC costing. It allocates indirect cost to production. It focuses on activities and cost of activities, and we have a separate allocation rate for each activity. So example we'd have machine setup, material handling, fabrication, supervising, assembly, inspection, and packaging. Those might be some examples of cost drivers. Now we have a cost hierarchy. We have the facility level type activities. These are incurred no matter how many units, batches, or products are produced. We have the product level, which is incurred for a particular product. We have a batch level, which is incurred every single time, a good example would be a machine setup. Every time they have a new batch, they have a new machine setup. And then we have unit level, which is incurred for every unit produced. So now let's take a look at how we would classify them by going through this exercise. So each container is cut from the mold once the plastic is cooled and hardened. That would be a unit level. Patents are obtained for each new type of container mold. That would be a product level. Plastic resins are used as the main direct materials for the containers. Unit level. Plant manager oversees the entire manufacturing operation. Faculty level. The sales force incurs travel expenses. Faculty level. Each container product line has a product line manager. Product level. The excursion machine is calibrated for each batch. That would be batch level. Each type of container has its own unique molds. Product level. Routine maintenance is performed on the extrusion machines. Facility level. Rent is paid. That would also be facility level. Now let's look at some examples. If you had an activity like material purchasing, your cost driver would probably be number of purchase orders. Material handling might be number of parts. Warranty service might be number of service calls. So these are just some examples. So now let's work through a problem that uses plant-wide overhead versus ABC costing. So in this case, we have plant-wide overhead rate. It's based on our total estimated overhead cost of 1,440,000 with an estimated machine hours of 12,000. This is the breakdown of how those overhead costs are spread. The cost pools would be machine maintenance, engineering change orders, and hazardous material disposal. Now, job A was started and completed with the following, and this is what we consumed to make this product. What is the total cost using plant-wide overhead? And then we'll look at it using ABC costing. Now, first, we're going to identify and estimate indirect costs. We know they're 1.4 million. Then we're going to select an allocation base. That's going to be machine hours. Then we're going to compute the cost allocation rate, which is the estimated total cost divided by the estimated machine hours. So we get $120 per machine hour. Now we're going to allocate that overhead. First, we have 250 pounds of direct material at $45 per pound. We have 60 direct labor hours at $25 per hour. And we have our machine hours allocating our overhead, and we get 10,800. So we're estimating that our total cost right now to make this product was 23,550. Now let's cost the same product using ABC costing. Now here's our cost pools and our cost drivers. We have 3: maintenance, engineering, change orders, hazardous waste. Now we're going to compute our individual rate. Maintenance, machine maintenance is going to be $70 for machine hour. Engineering change orders is going to be $20 per change order. And hazardous waste disposal is going to be $290 per pound. Now we're going to allocate the overhead. So we're going to first do our direct costs, and then we're going to take 90 machine hours at $70, 6 change orders at $20, and 30 pounds of hazardous waste at $290. Now, if you notice again, that really does change how much it really costs to make this product, particularly if you have a product that generates a lot of hazardous waste. That is going to affect your pricing. So again, activity-based costing gives a more accurate picture of what a product costs. And we'll go over some more of these problems in Part 2. Now, cost benefit. Do the benefits of adopting ABC costing, ABC management? Well, it is a very expensive system because not only do you have to identify the cost drivers, but then you have to set up a system to collect the costs and make sure all the costs go there. That's not easy. So benefits are higher for companies in competitive markets. It gives them a more accurate product cost information and can pinpoint cost savings. Benefits are higher when risk of cost distortion is high. When you have many different products, many different types and amounts of resources. And you have high indirect costs and high and low volume products. That ends Part 1 for Chapter 4. And now we go on to Part